Hello, everyone. Sorry about the late start this morning. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Cynthia, one of the instructors with Iris Reading. Happy to see you in the audience today. I'm curious, some of you are joining us. Where did you guys hear about our comprehensions workshop for this morning? Was it in a previous session, or did you just find us on Eventbrite? Either way, or do you follow us on social media, whether that be YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, anything? Let me know. I see that we have quite a few people joining us, so if you'd like to share where you're joining from, you are more than welcome to. Iris Reading is based out of Chicago. We are a company, again, that is based out of Chicago. We love Chicago, obviously. I am broadcasting from the Chicagoland area. If you'd like to share where you're joining us from, I see we have some visitors from Salt Lake City, so welcome. Happy to see you today. I'm curious. Thank you. Hello, Richmond, Virginia. Excuse me. Have you ever heard of Iris Reading in the past? Let us know in the comment section. We are looking to see which hitties we should come through next. We are offering live workshops now. Thankfully, we're allowed to do that now after the COVID pandemic. So we are slowly coming back, maybe to a city near you. So let us know again where you're joining us from, and we're going to have to take a look at the US map to see where we need to go next. Now, a few documents that we'll use for today's presentation, you'll find them at irisreading.com/comp. I will also share them on my screen, but if for some reason you can't see it, or you maybe want to download it or print something out, you can find that at irisreading.com/comp. Okay, really quickly, I know I shared our social media, but I want to just quickly share again. If you do enjoy today's presentation, we want to learn a little bit more about us here at Iris Reading and what we're doing. Please check us out. We are on YouTube as you are watching today. Check out some of our other videos. We are mainly known for our speed reading and memorization technique webinars or workshops. Those are our top two. We've taught those workshops in over 100 cities around the world. We also offer note-taking, productivity and focus for adults and for students. And brand new course we've launched in March of this year, Comprehension Strategies, or how to better comprehend information. Now, if you have attended any of our webinars from earlier in the week, you may have heard me say that questions are very, very important, right? But before we get into that, let me just quickly share our IRIS method. So as we already mentioned a few times, we are Iris Reading, and we do have an acronym after our company name. And it's what we considered, it's our version of the study cycle. So we have something called the IRIS method. Now the I is for inspecting, and we talk about that in our speed reading workshop, where we break down how you really first want to understand what you're working with before you actually start to read it. So whether that be looking at the pictures, looking at the vocabulary words, looking at the headings and subheadings, all of that, those are the things that you would look for when inspecting something new. Okay, I know most of us are primed to kind of just read from beginning to end, no skipping, no reading ahead, nothing like that. But inspecting helps on a number of levels, and we discuss what and why those reasons are so important in that speed reading workshop. After we inspect, we decide if we want to read something or not, okay? And this is really helpful, especially for students, whether they're doing their undergrad or they're in grad school. You might have a professor that sends over just like all kinds of material over the weekend, read this, look at that, right? And it's hard to know sometimes what's important and what isn't. So inspecting can help save us a lot of time and headaches, right? We don't have to struggle or stress out about what we should be reading when inspecting. It's something brief, it's fast, and you get the most out of, again, what you actually do have to read. Then we want to ask questions. So we've decided if we're going to read something, and then we need to start asking all of the questions after we read. For example, what does this have to do with anything? Why am I reading this? what's the point, right? Some of those may seem like rather sarcastic questions, but if we can't answer them, then that kind of proves to us that we don't really understand what we're reading. And we're not reading always for fun, right? We're reading because we want to understand. So we have to ask questions. And the small problem we found there is that most people don't know what questions they should be asking, especially when it's a subject that you feel is way, 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 way out of your league, right? Like, for example, I am a graduated nurse, and when I left high school and went right into nursing school, I thought it was going to be standard reading like I would do in my English classes, right? What a big surprise. It was almost like reading in another language, right? We know a lot of words in medical terminology are either of Greek or Latin origin. So half the time I was reading and I had no idea what was happening, right? And I couldn't explain it. I didn't understand it. And it was just a big confusing mess. So we have to ask questions and we have to know what questions we should be asking. And again, when the subject is rather tricky, we don't always understand how to ask the right questions. So that's our third step, asking questions, and we'll talk about that today. And our final step is moving on to a storing method, whether that be in your memory or whether that be some kind of note-taking method. All right, we don't want you to write something down or memorize something if it doesn't make sense, because if you're writing it down and it doesn't make sense now, it's probably not going to make sense later. Right? If you don't have the professor available to you later, why would we write something down now that we don't understand? Same thing with memorizing something. If you try to memorize something that you don't really get, it's almost like memorizing something that's really big and really empty. Okay, so we want to make sure again that we are thinking about the material, ruminating over this material, meditating on it, and then moving on to storing it and understanding what we're storing. Okay, now we talked about questions, and we have 6 questions that we are going to discuss today. Now you can apply these to really any field, any material, anything that you are looking to learn and comprehend better. But as we said, sometimes we just don't know what we should be asking. Okay, so we have uncovered what I like to call the 6 dimensions of better comprehension. Okay, first being just the ability to explain something. Okay, unfortunately, most of us stop after we think we can successfully explain something, whether that be to the wind or to a friend or to our parent, a teacher, whoever. Most of us stop here. So I think everyone has the right idea initially. Well, let me see if I can explain this, right? And that's great, but we don't want to stop there. Next dimension is reviewing the different perspectives on the subject. Now, you'd be surprised how many opposing and conflicting perspectives you can find on a variety of subjects. Okay, so we want to dive into that. We want to see why people maybe have opposing views on a specific subject, right? We want to talk about your self-knowledge, so we're tapping into ourselves at this point. What do we know? How do we live? What do we see every day, right? Us. It's all about you when you're studying, seeing that you are going to take the exam and this is your grade, right? Also empathy. So we want to tap into our emotions as well. Can we empathize with the author or with the subject? What maybe led this author or this person that wrote this, what led them to pursue this career? What in their life made them want to be an expert in the field or strive to know as much as possible in the field, right? Maybe some back history would be helpful. So empathy. Also practical application, and this is very, very important when we're talking about subjects that most people don't like, right? And I'm not going to name the subjects that most of us really don't like, because I think I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but right, some of us have a subject where we just think about it and you just automatically roll your eyes because you're like, I haven't used that. I knew I wasn't going to use it after high school and I haven't used it still. But we don't want to have that attitude when we are reviewing things that are maybe challenging or just not our favorite. Okay, so finding some kind of practical application it's helpful, it's important. And our final point is how has this been interpreted by others? So whether that be a language translation or interpretation, you know, things are lost in translation. Sometimes the meaning is not always there when something is translated or interpreted. But we were thinking more like along the lines of maybe artistic representation or some kind of music that was inspired by the subject, right? This is helpful too. So we'll break down all of these. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to drop them in the chat throughout the presentation. I'll share my email at the end of the presentation as well. So if you'd like to ask questions, you'd like hear a little bit more about this, you'd like to work with us, please feel free to reach out. Now, before we talk about, we break down those 6 dimensions, we want to see what your current comprehension skills, how are they? Because we're actually going to read something right now. Sorry about that. We're going to read something with this link, irisreading.com/comp. We're going to, so if you want to open this link up in a separate tab in your browser, you can. I'm going to share the document on my screen as well. You're going to look for the article that is called focusrituals.pdf, okay? And when you open that up, it's going to look like this, okay? I am going to give you 2 minutes, and I would like you to read and just think about what you've read, see if you know what our overall understanding is with this article. Okay, so I will disable my webcam. I will turn off my mic. You'll notice the timer going off in the middle of the screen right here. Okay, so 2 minutes to read and just to think about, you know, what our comprehension skills are as of right now. Okay, here we go. 3, 1, I'm sorry, 3, 1, 2. I haven't had coffee this morning. 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so hopefully we were able to read, maybe not finish the article, but read the majority of it. Now, thinking about your current comprehension strategies, what would you give yourself with comprehension? Would you say you understood 90% of what you read, 50, 60, 70%, right? We wanna kind of establish a little bit of a baseline before we move on, right? And we'll do this one more time at the end of the presentation, and hopefully we see a higher score here this second time. So let's talk about all of these questions, right? Sometimes we think that comprehension is automatic. And for some people it is, but not for everybody, right? And of course, it depends on the subject as well. But let's think about a subject that most people feel rather competent in, but maybe we don't have as much comprehension on the subject as we maybe thought we did, right? So let's talk about something that again is fairly known to people, and that's the subject of gravity, right? We know gravity. We know that whatever goes up is going to come down. We know that we don't have to worry about things floating into the atmosphere, right? We know that, or so we think we know that, right? So if you're agreeing with me and you're like, yeah, I got a good idea of what comprehension is, I understand it. All right, cool. So can you then maybe explain the theory of relativity in relation to gravity? How does that all work together? Or maybe how quantum physics ties into gravity as well, or maybe even just how distance ties into gravity. See, it's like, wait a minute, we never said anything about this stuff, right? But it all works with gravity. So maybe we don't have as much of an understanding of gravity as we thought we did, right? So let's start with something, step one, back to our questions. Let's see if we can explain it. Now, most of us may be able to explain something rather basic on gravity, right? But the purpose of explaining this to someone is to get people to ask you questions on what you think you know, rather get people to poke holes into what you think you know, because you might be convinced that you understand something because you've explained it beautifully, maybe to the wall. But if you don't explain it to someone who maybe has no idea on the subject, then you're not going to be able to test what you think you know, okay? So the point is to get people to ask you questions. And we're not talking about like really deep philosophical questions. We're just thinking about like, why? Why is what you're saying? Why is that true? Why is that written? Why? Just why? Explain why. And if our reasoning or our response is, well, that's just how it is, then we don't understand what we think we do. Okay, so we want to be able to explain it. Why does the ball roll down the ramp, right? Why isn't it floating up? Why isn't it rolling up? Why didn't it stop? You notice we're asking questions and we're also not answering them. So we're not answering them because we want you to do the research and find the answer yourself. We want to pique your interest and we want you to explore further. Again, most of us stop at, well, that's just because, but finding out the reason is helping us deepen our comprehension. Okay, so explain it well, and preferably explain it to people who don't know anything on the subject, maybe a 5-year-old, right? Which reminds me of that, found this thing on Reddit where it's like, explain like I'm 5, right? And it's like, all these really, really complicated subjects, but simplified. So that may be something you look into, okay? Maybe we can look up, explain what, like I'm 5, gravity, why, right? Just why? And that reminds me also of Feynman's technique or Feynman's method of taking notes. I believe one of the steps is to write things in simple terms as well as the actual terms themselves, right? And that's important because if you are repeating word for word what the book says, then that's not necessarily understanding something. That's more like just repeating, right? And anything anybody can repeat, right? Um, Parrots can repeat things, but that doesn't mean that they understand, right? So we wanna think about that. We're not just saying from the book like, because we have great memory, for example, because that's not comprehension. That's not the same thing. So we've talked about explaining something, hopefully, whatever subject you are looking to pursue, whatever major, you are starting off with a basic explanation and then gradually moving your way up, okay? Now we got to get into the different perspectives. Now, there are different perspectives on many subjects, okay? You'd be surprised what we have found. That's kind of one of my roles here at IRIS, is to just kind of like look into different things and just read, right? And so when we were creating this presentation and we were playing around with the idea of gravity and these 6 dimensions, I thought, are there really people that maybe don't believe in gravity? Yes, there are, and there is this anti-gravity alliance, and this is not like fake. You can look this up, and this is their website. I just took a picture of it. It says gravity is a lie. If gravity exists, then how do birds, bats, and insects fly? How do airplanes fly? Why do balloons float up? What makes a hot air balloon keep from falling from the sky, right? So thinking about what we just said about explaining something, if we thought we had a good understanding of gravity, can we maybe explain or debunk these questions that are on these people's website? And don't think it's just the one website. They have a whole list of supporting websites as well. And we looked into them. Okay, so regardless of if you think this is funny or maybe these individuals are just interesting people, whatever the case is, it's still worth your time to at least see why they think this way, and if you can defend what your perspective is versus theirs. It doesn't stop there. We also at the National Center for Science Education have found that they consider gravity to be a theory. So that's interesting because I'm sure most of us thought that gravity was a fact, right? So when we've got the words theory and fact, they're not necessarily related, right? I mean, that's not how that works. So that's interesting. We also have found individuals that have submitted their dissertations for a PhD, writing that gravity is a myth. Okay, and we've even uncovered or found, I'm sorry, an astrophysicist that said he does not believe in gravity, Dr. Brian Keating. Which, speaking of, I'd love to meet him and maybe have a conversation on this. Of course, I'm not taking a side, but I'd love to hear from an astrophysicist his reasons as to why he believes that gravity does not exist. Maybe we'll have to tag him in the comments so he can come by and have a conversation with us. The point is, with all of this, is that there are different perspectives. So maybe now you're like, wait a minute. I thought, right? I thought something, and I thought most people thought the same thing, but it looks like there are some that don't, right? We won't get into the politics of it, but it is good to see why people think that way. And it is good because it can help sharpen, again, what you think you know. So those are the different perspectives, okay? And notice we'll be tearing apart gravity for the rest of the presentation. So you might, uncover a few things on gravity you'd never thought of. Maybe some of you will be interested now in researching a little bit more on gravity, right? Not taking it for granted maybe, which is something we'll talk about in a moment. Moving on to step 3 is your self-knowledge, okay? And when people say, oh, it's It's not all about you. Yes, it is. Absolutely, 100%. Always 100% about you when we're talking about reading and learning and memorizing and taking notes and focusing and productivity and comprehending. All of the workshops here in Iris Reading, we are definitely saying it is all about you. Okay. We want you to think about you because you are the student. You are the one that needs to take the test, right? So, when we are tying in this point of self-knowledge, we want to look for things like function and purpose. So what can we maybe tie in here? Well, it is Cinco de Mayo today, and that's a pretty big holiday in Chicago, right? We have a lot of people that celebrate it. On top of it, it's Friday night, so I can only imagine how Chicago will be tonight. But anyway, people will be partying, and so what happens after a night of partying, right? Maybe they wake up in the morning and they need some eye drops, right? Because, we don't have to get into it, but a party, right? A wild Chicago party. So some people will use eye drops, right? The next day. And so when we use eye drops, we never really have to worry about the drops floating up, right? We know that they're going to float down. I mean, you might miss your eyeball. I think your average person has a hard time getting eye drops in their eyes, but we never have to worry about them floating up, right? So again, basic function and purpose, right? This, may be easier for some subjects and not for others, but we still want to go through the motions of assigning or finding function and purpose, because again, it's actually something we talk about in our memory workshop, which is repetition and how that's good for memory, right? So just the repeating of the information can lead us to not only have it committed to memory a little bit longer, but also, to deepen that understanding as well. So we've gotten into your self-knowledge, okay? Moving on to the next step, which is empathy. Now, who needs empathy when we're talking about gravity? Who goes through periods of not having gravity, right? Astronauts. And what are some things that maybe we do here on Earth that maybe astronauts can't do or can't do as easily when they're up in space? You might be thinking of a few things, right? But here's just something that we came up with the other day. I mean, something we do a couple times a day, right? It varies from person to person, but like, has anybody ever wondered how they go to the bathroom up in space? Because here on Earth, when we use the bathroom, we don't have to worry about anything floating up. I mean, if it comes up, we maybe have a problem with our toilet or with our septic tank, but it usually never flies out of the toilet, right? And so we don't have to worry about that. So, but that's not the case when we're talking about astronauts. See, they are floating. So does that mean that the toilet is floating too, right? I can only imagine this to be a bit of a disaster, right? But again, I have no training, none whatsoever. I know nothing about, the mechanics of how this works. But we'd again, maybe NASA wants to come on and give us a little lesson on this, because I find it fascinating. Anyway, tying it into, right, I'm getting derailed here a little bit. We actually found an article on the subject. So how do astronauts go to the bathroom in space? A look at the space shuttle toilet and the deepest, darkest secrets about space flight. Ooh, all right. We found this paragraph. It says, now get a load of this. This is really going to rock your world this morning. It says, for solid waste deposits, the toilet has foot straps and thigh braces to help astronauts stay in place, and airtight bags on hand for toilet paper disposal. Astronauts spend a lot of time in training sitting on space toilets to learn how to create a strong seal and how to align themselves properly. In Houston, the Johnson Space Center has a bathroom with 2 space toilets for practice. One model is fully functional, and the other is a positional trainer that has a camera beneath its rim and a television monitor on the table in front of it. Astronaut Mike Massimino calls it the second toilet, the deepest, darkest secret about spaceflight in the training video. This takes a lot of glamour out of the business when you go for training. What? Okay, so just think about that, using the bathroom up in space. What are some other things that maybe we do down here that are fairly easy to do, like taking a shower, for example, right? I mean, I think the worst thing that I go through when taking a shower is that my neighbors use all the hot water. But other than that, I'm good. I don't have to worry about the water going anywhere. But I found this really cool TikTok I should probably include in this presentation of an astronaut that's washing her hair up in space, and she has what looks like one of those like Capri Sun bottles with a straw, and she'll like squeeze it, and the water, she's trying to squeeze it into her scalp, but the water floats away, so then you see her kind of like catch all the water and like push it into her head like this. I mean, I might be the only one. I don't know. You let me know. But I found that like, wow, amazing, right? Again, we don't think about that kind of thing because we have water at our disposal down here on Earth, no problem. Another fun one, have you ever thought about what happens when you burp up in space? And I'm not going to give you the answer. I'll just repeat one quote that stayed in my mind. Something about the gases in your intestines turning into chunky bubbles. And that's all we'll say on the subject. You look it up or send me an email and I can send you the article I was reading. But the point is, maybe now we can empathize a little bit more with our astronauts, whether they're from the Canadian Space Agency or NASA, whatever. That must be something pretty hard to deal with, right? So we've talked about this empathy. Now we're going to move on to some practical application. Now this, as I said, similar to self-knowledge, may be easier to do with some subjects rather than others, right? So how is this applied in the larger world? Okay, so maybe kind of take a step back and look out at the world, whether that be outside your window, at your job, at your class, in your classroom, right? How does this look at some things around you that maybe are affected by gravity, right? Maybe if we are like on a baseball team, softball team, we never worry about the ball. If we throw it, it's not going to flow up into space. It's going to come down to Earth, right? So that's a simple application, or larger world application. We don't necessarily have to worry about that. But it's good to think about this. And as we said, there are some subjects that most of us really don't like. Like, I'll just come out and say it. I hated algebra when I was in high school. I was like, I'm never going to use this. This is pointless. I don't understand any of it. Right? I don't understand why. And it was more so I didn't really want to understand why. It wasn't that I didn't understand it was important. I just didn't care for it. Right? And surprise, surprise, actually ran into some algebra when I was in nursing school. Right? And then I was wishing that I had paid more attention because then I had to get a tutor and it was just a whole mess. So the point is, we don't want to go that route. We just want to find this application in the larger world. Think about it. And that's also like a good break from constantly obsessing over the same material. If you kind of take a step back and just look outside and see how the material you're reading right now affects you daily, whether it's in the neighborhood or anything like that. Okay, it's a nice way to kind of not tense up on the subject and allow your brain to relax, but still think about it. Okay. So that is our 5th dimension. Now let's get into our final dimension, which is the interpretation by others. Okay. And if you speak more than one language, you know that, for example, English doesn't always translate the meaning when you're speaking in languages like Spanish or French or Arabic, right? The meaning is not always there. So that's one way to look at the material if you have access to this material in another language. But also, like, artistic representation is something to look at. For example, we had a lot of fun with this presentation. And if you have any suggestions on another subject you think we should break down, leave it in the comments down below. We are looking to hopefully do one of these, a different subject every week. Found it great. And so when we were looking into gravity, we were looking specifically with art. We found a whole line of sculptures that are gravity defying. That's their category, gravity defying sculptures. And we found this one, and this is The Force of Nature by, I believe his name is Lorenzo Quinn. And again, with everything we've talked about with gravity, it doesn't really make sense, right? Shouldn't this sculpture tip over because of weight, right? Gravity pushes things down, so that ball should have tipped the entire sculpture over, and it hasn't. We have found this one as well, which is in Paris, I believe in the Fontainebleau. I don't even know what is keeping this thing up, right? The elephant, right? Interesting. I'd love to see this in person. But when you look at it, you think this is generated by AI, but it's not, it's real. Something else we've found, and we've actually had a few people that have jumped on these presentations, and they've mentioned that they've either seen these floating rocks that are in Cairo, or they actually helped put them together, assemble them. We had an engineer come by a couple weeks ago that said, oh, I had something to do with the installation of these sculptures, so that was cool as well. These are called the floating rocks, and they're in Cairo. My favorite, though, because we're Irish reading and we love books, all things related to books, are these sculptures that are found in Madrid. I don't know, no amount of glue, I think, can keep these books like that. Like, I think there's got to be something else there, right? So we look at all this, and we're kind of thinking about everything we thought we knew about gravity, right? And how is this all staying upright? So we have found the answers to those questions, but we're not going to give them to you because we would like you to research them yourself. Because again, that's the point of today's presentation, asking all of the questions. So let's do a quick recap on all of the dimensions, okay? We talked about explaining something. We want to start off by being able to explain, okay? The different perspectives. So actually moving backwards, please don't stop. Just because you can explain it, that's great, but not enough, okay? Then we want you to move on to the different perspectives. We had a lot of fun researching the Anti-Gravity Alliance and all of the supporting agencies that have united with the AGA. So research them, try to figure out how to defend your point of view versus theirs, okay? Your self-knowledge, self-function, and purpose, you want to think about that when you are reading and learning. Empathy is very important as well. We have empathized, hopefully, with astronauts and them having to go to the potty up in space, right? How this is applied practically, and very important, we're going to stress the importance of this dimension when reading things that we don't like, right? And our final point, or our final dimension, was the interpretation by others, okay? So we want to make sure that we're looking at that. Sometimes we think that we have to read the same passage over and over to get some comprehension out of it, but or better comprehension, but you don't need to obsess over it. You take a step back, think about these questions, see if you can answer these questions. It's not as stressful either, so please don't stress yourself out over this comprehension. We've broken it down to make it a little bit easier for you, regardless of the subject. Now, something else that helps with comprehension is inspecting before you read, okay? And this is a little taste or a sample of our speed reading workshop because, again, as I said, it's our most popular one for for one, and also really, really good if you want to be a productive reader or more of a productive reader. So this also helps with comprehension. When we're reading whatever it is we're reading, these are the things you want to look at: the intro, headings and subheadings, words in bold and or italics, titles of charts, tables, and diagrams, the conclusion, as well as any questions that may be published in this piece. Okay, so all of this you want to look for before you start to read. Not only does it help with comprehension, but it also helps with attention and focus, which is something that we are very passionate about as well here at Iris Reading. So definitely check that out. Sorry, I think I got the hiccups. Now, remember we assessed your comprehension in the beginning. Let's go ahead and assess it again now. Now, I wish we had more time together because 2 minutes, or let's see, we're going to have 2 minutes to read this article. It's not a lot of time, but hopefully with this inspection, so we're going to inspect it together. I'm going to give you time to read it, and then I'm hoping that you're able to think about at least some of those dimensions that we talked about and see if that helped raise the comprehension score you give yourself this time. So let's quickly inspect this, which again, ideally is something you do before you read anything. So going with the flow, life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Now keep in mind, we're inspecting this article, so we're reading everything in yellow, we've just highlighted. Don't resist them. This only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally forward in whatever way they like. Okay, nice. Number 1, realize that you can't control everything. Oh. Number 2, become aware. Number 3, breathe. Number 4, get perspective. Number 5, practice. 6, laugh. And 7, realize that you can't control others. Ooh, interesting. Okay, and then the descriptive sentence at the bottom says, this passage is selected from the book Focus, a Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction by Leo Babauta, which, by the way, the author has given us permission to share this book. We have it, so if you'd like it, you'd send me a message. I'll give you my email again, and you can send us an email for a copy of the book free of charge. Okay, so now we are going to finish reading the article. I'm going to give you up until 2 minutes to read it, and then we will give ourselves a comprehension score. Okay, disabling my webcam. Here we go, everyone. 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so that was our going with the flow article. Now we're thinking about maybe some of those dimensions. Now, hopefully, of course, in the future, you don't have to time yourself when we're talking about comprehension, but you have some more time to think about those different dimensions, right? Like, for example, what are some people that maybe disagree with this material? How can we empathize with the author, Leo Babauta, when he wrote this? Can we explain in simple terms and maybe elaborate ones what this article was about? What is some practical and functional purpose, right, with what we just read? So think about all of that when reading, okay? We want to kind of make it a little bit of a cycle when you are reading. Every time you do it, make it routine. We also want to assess your comprehension again, so give yourself a second score, and hopefully we are seeing that the second score is higher than the first one, okay? And if you made improvements, then that's great. That's tremendous. That's exactly what we like to see. If you didn't, that's okay. That just maybe means you need to practice a little bit more. I mean, this might be the first time that a lot of us have ever attended a comprehension workshop like this, right? And let alone discuss gravity on all different levels. So don't feel bad. All right, that just means we have to practice a little bit more. And we are working on creating like a worksheet or a sticky note or something where you can kind of use it as a template in the beginning stages if you're trying to cultivate this this as routine. So let us know if that's something you're interested in the comments or in the chat. Just curious to see. We played around with making it a bookmark, but I was thinking more like a sticky note. I don't know yet. So just let us know what your thoughts are, and of course we want to hear what the audience has to say on the subject as well. Now, inspecting, just remember this when we're talking about inspecting, we just want you to get the gist of it first, okay? First, just see what's going on, right? And I always usually mention, like, growing up on the island of Puerto Rico, we have a lot of like rivers and wildlife, and I live at the top of a mountain right at the corner of a jungle. Like, the jungle is literally behind my parents' house, and so you know, it's obviously very hot over there. I actually don't live too far away from where they filmed one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So it's beautiful, but it's hot, and the humidity is just, it just feels like it's choking you. But the point is that when it's so hot, it usually will run to either the ocean, or maybe there's like little rivers or streams by the house. And so there's, as I said, a lot of wildlife over there. So we don't just jump into any puddle of water without first inspecting to make sure that there is it's safe, for one, and that there's nothing in there that's going to electrocute you or zap you or bite you or snap at you or anything like that, right? It's happened one too many times. So same thing with reading. You want to make sure you're not just nose diving into something you have no idea. Maybe you're not prepared for, you haven't had enough coffee to get through yet. So remember that when we're talking about inspection. Want to quickly just refresh our IRIS method again. So we are IRIS reading. Want to make sure you're inspecting before you read. Decide if you're going to read or not. Ask all the questions, right? Which is what we talked about today. And then think about a storing method that works for you. And here's a fun fact: we don't all think in the same way, which means that there have to be other ways of memorizing the information, right? It can't just be the standard flashcards and reading over the same thing 25 times that can lead us to memorize something. So if you want to hear any more about that, you are more than welcome to check out all of our webinars that are now offered on Eventbrite. We're not sure how long we'll be offering them, so take advantage. Speed reading is on there, note taking is on there, and memory is on there as well as today's presentation, which is Comprehension Strategies. So also I'll share, if you would like a copy of the book that we have that we can distribute for free, Leo Babauta's Focus, a Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction. you are more than welcome to send me an email at cynthia@irisreading.com, and I can send that to you immediately. With that, I want to thank you for coming. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything, please send me an email at cynthia@irisreading.com. And then also check us out on social media. So we are, I know you know we're on YouTube because you're watching us on YouTube, but check out our Instagram, our TikTok, and our Facebook official account, as well as our Facebook group, which is called Book Lovers Assemble. So hope to see you in a future session. And of course, you're more than welcome to check out our website as well, irisreading.com. With that, I will let you go. Happy reading, happy learning, and hope to see you soon, guys. Thanks. Bye.